Schlosberg. I was born here in Henrietta in 1890. I went to grade school here in Henrietta. I graduated from Henrietta High School, and but a lot of stories have been told about me. Some of them true, some of them not true, because I am a very private person. So sometimes when people don't know anything about you, they just make it up. Not too many years ago, the Wichita Record News wrote an article about me entitled "A Ghost Lady or a Lonely Lady." Well, I don't think I'm either one of those. Also, a student wrote a research paper about me, titled it "The Mysterious Lady." So perhaps I have been a little bit mysterious because of my privacy. But maybe today, in telling you my story, maybe I can clear up some of these stories. Before I go on about my life, I want to tell you about my father. My father was a fine man, an excellent businessman. Those who he employed said that he was wonderful to work for. His name was Bernice Schlosberg. He was born in Buffalo, New York in 1860, came to Texas in 1877, came to Clay County in 1885. He married my mother, Sally Mayer, in 1887. And both of them had descendants from Germany. Both of them were of the Jewish faith, which was kind of an odd thing for Henrietta to have Jewish people in the community. My father was a very outstanding businessman. He made wonderful investments. He started the dry goods store here in Henrietta, which was successful. We carried some of the finest products to sell. He also was partnership with his brother-in-law in El Paso, Texas. He brought land. He brought some ranching land south of Henrietta. He owned that land. After my death, J.T. Lyles bought that land, and today his niece Sharon Fitz owns that land. Kind of a funny story about that. When I still had the land, Mrs. Shear leased that land. And I heard one day that one of her workers cut down a mesquite tree to build the fence. Well, to me, that was hurting nature. So if you've ever driven by my land out there, if you recall, it was quite brushy because I didn't believe in cutting down those mesquite trees back then. But anyway, back to my father. He did a lot of investment in Dallas and did really, really well. He was out visiting his sister and his brother-in-law in El Paso when he became very ill, and within a matter of a few days he died of pneumonia, and at the age of 62. Because of his Jewish faith, they have a tradition of being buried within 24 hours, and so my father was buried in El Paso. Let's go back to me. After I graduated from high school, I went to Washington, D.C. and attended the Washington College. I left there, and then I went to New York City. I attended the Benjamin Dean School, and then I went to the Juilliard School of Music. I was really quite talented. Going back to my days in Henrietta, my father, who loved me very much, made the second floor of the dry goods store kind of into a performance hall for me. He built a stage there, and I would entertain my friends there. We called ourselves the Jug, J-U-G Club, Just Us Girls. So I had lots of friends when I was a teenager. But apparently I was a soprano, and I had a wide range, and a lot of people enjoyed hearing me sing. In fact, I'm very proud to tell y'all today, at the age of 18, President Theodore Roosevelt invited me to come and sing at the White House at a reception. Oh, the dress I wore that night, it was gold thread embroidery. Oh, I'm very proud that I got to sing for the president at the age of 18. During the World War I performed a lot for soldiers. I attended a lot of army camps and would sing for them. They loved my singing, and I always requested at the end of my program that we all stand and sing the Star Spangled Banner. I did move to Chicago, and I met a man by the name of Daniel Levy. Daniel and I married, and I was 25 years old when we married, and we remained married for about 4 to 5 years, and I divorced him. I came back to Henrietta to help my mother with the dry goods store here in Henrietta. My brother, Sylvan, he was a lot like my father. Businessman, also they both were big in Masons. In fact, my brother was a 32nd degree Mason by the time he was the age of 21. But he made wonderful business investments also, and but he became ill in his late 20s, and my brother died at the age of 30. So that was just my mother and I then left to run the store. Now, we did have an employee. She wasn't married at the time, but later on she married a Harmon, so I'll just refer to her as Mrs. Harmon. Mrs. Harmon, well, the rumor was that I was not friendly, that I was rude to customers at our store. And my mother often had to scold me for being rude. And Mrs. Harmon said that I apparently just didn't have the personality for being friendly. But I don't see myself like that at all. I had lots of, like the Jug Club, I had lots of friends. I had friends in Dallas, I had friends here in Henrietta, and even after I came back and became a little bit more private in my life, when I would be out and about, Jacquetta Graves saw me at the grocery store one day, and she said I was very friendly. Chris Shear said that when I would come to his flower shop that I was very friendly. And I had women here, and Mrs. Carl Shear, Mrs. Nanny Douthit, Carl Slagle's first wife. These were my friends. Now, I did tell them, I will not come to your home. Do not call me and invite me to your home. But I did occasionally invite one of them to come to my home. And so one day I invited Mrs. Carl Shear, Helen, to come to my home, and when I would invite them, I would get out my best crystal, my silver, my china, the linens. So Mrs. Shear comes over, and when she sees how beautiful I have everything, she says, "Oh, Bernice, if I had known this was going to be such a formal event, I would have dressed up." I said to Helen, "Well, if I invite you, it is a formal event." In fact, Mrs. Shear said, when I brought out that tea set, that was the most beautiful tea set she had ever seen in her life. Now, this might put a smile on somebody's face in here, but Mrs. Shear's son, Bobby Shear, some of you might remember Bobby. Bobby, as a young boy, was taking voice lessons. Mrs. Shear told that Bobby Shear was taking voice lessons. So I thought, well, I think I'll practice up a little bit and offer to give Bobby voice lessons. So I told Mrs. Shear, I said, how about me giving Bobby voice lessons? And she told Bobby, Bobby did not like that idea. I just can't imagine Bobby not wanting to take voice lessons from me, but he did. But anyway, going on with my story, here in Henrietta, I was divorced, but I did have a boyfriend. He was a car salesman in Wichita Falls, and we were planning on getting married, but he was killed in a car accident out on Highway 287. After that accident, I parked the car. I didn't really enjoy riding in cars very much, although I would go to Dallas occasionally. Morris Anderson has driven me to Dallas some. Mr. Simons has driven me, but a lot of times I would just take a bus. And I would go to Dallas, and visit my lawyer. And it is said that even though I dressed in the 1920s, 30 type clothes here, it is said that when I went to Dallas, I dressed very in modern clothes. And maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but I would treat my lawyer and his family to, I'd take them out to dinner at very nice restaurants there in Dallas, so perhaps I did dress up. In fact, my Dallas friends would say, Bernice, why don't you come live in Dallas? And I would say, no, Henrietta's my home. So I continue to live here in Henrietta. But I want to tell you a little something about my mother. When my brother became ill, he decided not to be of the Jewish faith anymore. He took up Christian Scientists. And so my mother and I also was Christian Scientists. And so there's a lot to that faith, but mainly we do not ask for medical help. My mother had a very severe ingrown toenail and did not seek medical help, and it grew worse and gangrene set in and took the life of my mother. So I am now left with my brother's gone, my dad's gone, my mother's gone, I'm left with the dry goods store. I decided in the early 40s, about 42, 43, somewhere along in there, just to close up the dry goods store. So one day I just locked the door and walked away. I left everything intact, everything in the windows stayed the same. Now, I do recall making one sale right after I closed up. Chris Shear's mother saw a little outfit that she wanted for little Chris in the window. So Miss Shear asked me, would I open up the store and let her buy that little outfit? And she did. So see, I am a friendly person. I am a friendly person. But it did remain closed. Occasionally, I would go to the store, unlock it, walk through it, and walk out. And this is what happened there. So sometimes they said, you know, about me that I always wore black. That's not true. I did not always wear black. I did wear a hat like this, but in the summer, I would wear a big, broad brim black hat. I believed in protecting my skin, as y'all can well see. I really like white skin. And often, when I would work in the yard, I would get out my opera gloves, and I would wear these to work in my yard too, because I protected my skin. And I'm very proud to tell you that at my death, at the age of 82, they said I had very few wrinkles. So I'm happy to tell you that. But if you want to know where I lived, you can. My home is still there. I lived at 103 South Pecan. You can see it. It's a lovely home. But after I divorced my husband, I did become a scaredy cat. I thought he would come to Henrietta and harm me. And so Mrs. Harmon would walk me to the store and back because I was afraid something would happen to me. So I know when I asked Jay Gentry to come and do some remodeling in my home, I'd lock him in the room where he was working, and if he needed to go back out to his pickup to get a screwdriver, I locked him out. Unlocked and locked him and let him come back in. So I was a scaredy cat. I really was, because I was afraid that might happen. But I lived my life till I was 82. I died of cancer here in my home here in Henrietta, and I am now buried with my brother and my mother in Dallas at the Hillcrest Mausoleum. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, pink, made out of pink granite. In 1948, I signed a bequest that upon my death, $40,000 was to be given to the Hillcrest Mausoleum to keep upkeep of my burial place, and to have flowers brought weekly or at least bi-monthly. And so when I died in 1872, that was when that $40,000, 1972, excuse me, 1972. So when I died, that $40,000 was to go to the mausoleum. All of my assets went to the Clint and Mary Falshe family. That was my lawyer in Dallas, and to Mr. and Miss Falshe and their children. And someone has told it that I owned half of downtown Dallas. Well, perhaps I did, or perhaps I didn't. But I did, if you'll recall, I told you my father made good investments. So I was quite wealthy. In fact, my brother-in-law, the one out in El Paso, he tried to interfere with my life and tried to have me put away one time to get my inheritance, to get my wealth. But that did not work out. Well, let's go back to the 40,000. Well, Hillcrest Mausoleum did not get that 40,000. So in 1975, they sued the Falshe family to get that money. And they won the case. The mausoleum won the case. Not only did they have to pay the $40,000, but they had to pay 6% interest from 1975 to 1979 so that they would get the money to have the flowers placed there. Well, these are just a few things about my life. I did fail to tell you about, I did perform in Henrietta. One time I performed for the Red Cross. And I made a speech at that, I said I was so proud to sing for Henrietta. I was so proud to raise money for the Red Cross, and I considered it a privilege to be able to do that. And we raised $90 for the Red Cross. But perhaps me telling you a little bit of my life will take away a little bit of the mystery and that you heard what I said. And I'm still going to stand on the fact I think I'm a friendly person.
We have refreshments. Welcome to cookies. If you want to talk to Miss Schlosberg, I guess she welcome you to visit with you.
I've got a deal I want to talk to Miss Schlosberg about.
Okay?
Schlossberg, you remember that old car that was in your garage?
Yeah. I failed to mention that, didn't I?
Yes, that was a very beautiful car.
Mm-hmm.
When we were young kids, we would go by your house, and we would look over into the glass door there, or the glass in the door. And I know you saw us, but you never did come and run us off. But that was a beautiful, beautiful car. And I understand that
That tree grew up in front of the garage door, and they had to cut out the end of the garage to get that car out after my death.
I understand that that car went to Gainesville.
All I know is it went to my lawyer and his children.
Okay. Well, I understand it was in Gainesville and someone parked it under a tree and just let it rot down.
Oh.
Very sad.
What kind of car was it then? Thank you.
Another thing, when I was, you may remember this, but when I was in high school, just a freshman in high school, you would come to A&P Food Store and get maybe 1 or 2 sacks of groceries. Well, you would take those groceries and walk home with them. So one day I talked to Mr. Farman, and I said, could I carry her groceries home for her? And he said, yes. So a couple of times I carried your groceries home, and you were most appreciative. But I just left them on the
Well,
porch.
like I said, I'm a
And I understand another thing. Upstairs above your store was at one time, was an opera house.
My father set that up for me to
Okay.
perform with my jug group.
That opera house had a popcorn machine in it. And Frank King one day brought that to me in a box. And it was just pieces. And he wanted to know if I wanted it. And I said, I sure do. I didn't know at that time where it came from. but I restored that popcorn machine. And it's in the
It's in
museum
here.
this time.
But you can't have it back. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever sing with Frances Snurley, who also went to Juilliard?
I have no memory of that.
Because she also studied there
Yes.
and sang some.
The Caldwells and the Snurleys were good friends of mine, for sure.
And
Yes,
she
they were
lived
my
to be
friends.
100.
See what?
She lived to be 100, and we had a birthday party for her
Mm-hmm.
at her house in Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
And her best friend came, and her best friend was Mrs. Tom Braniff. And so I got to meet Mrs. Tom Braniff, and that doesn't mean anything to a lot of people, but that's Braniff Airlines. So,
For those of you that knew Carol Phillips, he was an attorney for the law firm that handled that Hillcrest Mausoleum lawsuit. He was an attorney for them. How many of you remember Carol Phillips? Anybody?
Carol Chris Shears.
Chris Shears' uncle. Yes, and he was a lawyer for them, an attorney. Jim Crump reminded me of a story that I did not recall, that I had some young man mowing my lawn, and I paid him 75 cents to mow my lawn, and he asked me for $1, raised it, and according to Jim Crump, I cried.
As would have Jim Crow.
That is how you own half of downtown Dallas.
So she really left everything
To the
her
lawyer and their children. And their children, yes, she did.
Well, I think
And they must, I was friends with my lawyer. That's who I would visit when I would go to Dallas, and take them out to fine restaurants. And it's rather hurtful to know that they were so greedy that they would not honor my request for that
But everything
$40,000.
here, the buildings.
Everything, well,
everything
yes.
went to the
Yes.
lawyer.
We've also understood that the attorney in Dallas would send a limousine to pick you up and take you to Dallas for banking or
Well,
lawyer.
at the First National Bank, this might give some evidence that I did have quite a bit of wealth. When I would go to the First National Bank in Dallas, the president would meet me at the door personally.
Yes, and the car driver was asked to move the limo from in front of the bank, and he said, "But I have Miss Schlosberg." Oh, excuse me, let me get the door. Stories.
she asked what kind of car it was. Do you remember?
I don't. Back to an old Buick. But it was a beautiful.
Well,
I'd ask Miss Schlosberg.
I'm thinking it was a Buick, but I
Did
just don't
Neiman's,
recall.
send her packages quite often?
Ma'am?
Neiman's send her packages quite often?
I'm sure of that.
I've always heard
Yeah,
that.
lots of stories about me, and I've never revealed the truth of some of them, so it's hard to say. Kids would say I wore fire on my face. No, I didn't. It's talcum powder.
Did your store, turn to Alcorn's Dry Goods? Is that the same store?
No,
Do they-
no, ma'am.
No?
We're to the east of the
John's.
Alcorns, where it's a vacant lot today that I believe the Williams own that today. I do recall Mr. Oscar Graves coming to me one day after the building was beginning to, be in disarray, and there was a wooden awning that came out over the sidewalk, and it was coming pretty rickety, and Mr. Oscar Graves said, "Miss Bernice, you're gonna have to, it's gonna fall on someone and hurt them." So I did have that done, but the building was not torn down till after I died.
I have another question for you, Ms. Schlosberg. I don't know if you remember or not, but the one of the highlights of Henrietta was to walk by your store, look in the window, and there was a skeleton of a mouse in there. Why would you never move it?
Well, that's one of the mysteries of my life.
Do you, I would,
I think I should mention this. My husband was Waylon Threadgill, Senior, and his father bought land out there that you mentioned
Yes.
earlier, south of Henrietta. And Waylon, let's see, his father bought that land in 1926. Waylon wasn't born until 1927, and he lived out there from the time he was 7 years old. And he always referred to that land south of us as the Schlosberg
Yes.
place until he
That's why-
died 4 years ago. To him, it was still the Schlosberg place.
Yes.
And I think you'd be happy to know that that name still lives on
Yes, it
with
does.
David, his son, that's living
Thank
out
you,
there.
thank you, Mr. Redfield, for that.
well, I wanted you to, I don't know if you remember Jacquetta Graves when she was young, but I understand that she came to your door.
She did, and I scared that poor little girl to death. She was selling magazine subscriptions for the Midway School. And apparently she knew nothing about me, and I often dyed my hair. I would often dye my hair red. Some people, of course, once again, people in their stories said I wore a wig. That's not true. I just dyed my hair. Anyway, when she came to my door, I came to the door, and she said, "Oh, come." I said to her, "Well, come on in. I'm dying." Well, she left.
She didn't buy a subscription.
I didn't have the opportunity. She left.
Hurriedly. What year
Thank
did
you,
she
Miss.
die again?
In 1972,
Okay, well,
at the age of 82.
well, we built the office over here. I remember her walking by. And usually late in the afternoon, because we would always look out the window, you know, but I never did see her unless she was dressed in black and maybe walking down the street.
Well, I didn't know y'all were watching me.
I wasn't, maybe I could tell you even more.
Did you die alone?
Yes, in fact, they had to break into my house to find me. Yes, I did.
Who realized then you had passed away? How did they?
That I can't tell you.
She was dead.
Somewhere you didn't show up and it was time and.
Perhaps my lawyer could get a hold of me. I don't know.
Did your lawyer ever come to Henrietta? He probably did, didn't he? Or did she always go down there?
I don't recall him coming, but I'm sure he came after my death.
Thank you for coming
Thank
to visit.
you.